A new scientific study reveals that some people can actually see more frames per second in their video games than others. We've always heard that pro gamers have a better reaction time. Pro gamers can see and feel their frame drops, whereas you can't see it on the stream, whereas you can't see it or feel it in your game, but they claim to be very, very bothered by it. Well, new scientific research coming out of Trinity College in Dublin and published in journal PLOS ONE indicates that yes, some people actually can be more sensitive to frame rates, so I guess the companies making 540 hertz gaming monitors actually have some justification for their product. There has been an argument for a long time that anything above 160 the human brain cannot detect, so let's jump into the science here. The study tested 88 participants between the range ages of 18 to 35 on their critical flicker fusion, or CFF threshold, which is it basically monitors someone's visual temporal resolution, which is the fastest frame rate that a person can discriminate visual signals. They're looking for a flicker. They're putting extra little frames and flashes into the frame so that if you're watching something and it just does a little quick flash that you can see it, kind of like how they spliced in individual frames from a film at the beginning of Fight Club. And the idea behind this is to have a flashing light and increase its refresh rate until people believe that it is a constant just white screen and it's not flashing. Some people claim the light was constant when it was actually flashing just 35 times per second, which would be 35 FPS, which would mean that they can't really detect changes much beyond that. And other participants could detect flashes at rates greater than 60 times per second, hence the desire for people that want 120, 165 hertz gaming monitors. Even at speeds greater than 60 FPS, they could still tell that the light was flickering and flashing, hence their brain was processing some data, lack of light, there between the frames. And the scientist that did this study says, we think that people who see flicker at higher rates basically have access to a little bit more visual information per time frame than people on the lower end of the spectrum. The study also found little difference between sexes, so no indication that one might be superior. And this does just kind of make sense to me. Most things about the human body are on a spectrum from intelligence to speed, height, weight, reaction time, ability to taste, hear, smell, see, of course. So it would make sense that some people cannot detect a flickering light below a certain frequency or refresh rate, and others can detect it much beyond that, because I would imagine some people can see an incredible amount of frames and have incredible reaction times because they're just genetically gifted. Others might not be so lucky, but this does actually put some science into some pro gaming claims. A lot of pro gamers say that they can see and feel things that really science previously would have said was impossible, and it gives some credibility to companies that are cranking out these outrageously fast monitors. Apple has reportedly slashed the Vision Pro headset production and is also potentially canceling the updated headset that was supposed to come out next year because sales are tanking in the United States. Apple originally projected to sell about 800,000 of these devices, or I should say, they originally planned to manufacture 800,000 of these devices to have on the shelves. Unfortunately, demand has been so low that Apple's head of production has requested that it now be cut to 400,000 to 450,000, so roughly half as many sales as anticipated. And the sales are so bad, they're saying that the poor performance of the Vision Pro could mean that a planned update to the headset in 2025 may be canceled, which is really, really sad. The article here says it's tempting to conclude that the initial flurry of sales to YouTubers and influencers has died down, and the underlying demand from real-world users was always going to be limited. Arguably, that's thanks to two pretty obvious factors. Number one is that the base entry model of the headset is $3,500. Yeah, we're on PC Gamer here. $3,500 is a lot for a VR headset. You have to be rich, you have to be a hobbyist, you have to be really dedicated to this, and I've seen a number of people that have these things report that they don't use them that long, that they give them headaches, that it's a little bit heavy, that while it's very nice, it's just a toy, and it doesn't have any sort of killer app. It doesn't have anything really unique or crazy or cool or wild that it does that other devices can't or won't do. There's nothing that hype about it other than it just being a better VR headset. Now, I don't hate Apple, I don't hate VR. I actually hope that both of these succeed because I think the technology behind it is very cool. But it does make sense to me that people who are already not using their fancy VR headsets because There's just some fundamental things about the technology that make you not want to wear the headsets all the time, such as weight, neck strain, the weird like ring it leaves on your face, that charging $3,500 for just a better version of a similar thing probably wouldn't go over so well, which is unfortunate. And I kind of hope they don't cancel the update. I hope VR gets more funding. This technology has all sorts of promise for the future. It's just this is a rough start. The FCC has voted to reinstate net neutrality in a blow to internet service providers because they fought this tooth and nail. It should say in a win for consumers everywhere, because basically net neutrality prevents an internet service provider from putting a priority rating on a certain website or a certain type of traffic. For example, your internet service provider couldn't sign a deal to go Hulu exclusive and ban Netflix on their platform, or to shut down any of our favorite apps in order to favor ones that they're perhaps more heavily invested into. So the Obama administration set up a net neutrality order in 2015, which was almost immediately repealed under the Trump administration in 2017. And as we've been changing and appointing different people on the FCC. And what's happened is that on Thursday, the new Democratic majority had a vote. It's only 5 people on the committee, so it's 3-2 split along party lines, with Democrats supporting and Republican commissioners opposing net neutrality, voted to reinstate this service. And as AP says, this is a very excellent summary. Net neutrality effectively requires providers of internet service to treat all traffic equally, eliminating any incentive that they might face to favor business partners or to hobble competitors. So I think it's a very, very good thing. I think we definitely don't want to live in a world without net neutrality, because companies are going to do what companies are going to do, and they'll probably try to find a way to nickel and dime and squeeze more bandwidth out of you. The FCC chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel says, in our post-pandemic world, we know that broadband is a necessity and not a luxury, and I completely agree with her. And AP even mentions that California went a step further, banning a practice called zero rating, where a mobile provider might strike a deal with a business to steer users toward a particular streaming service by zeroing out any related data charges. Basically, like the data you use on HBO Max doesn't count against the data on your phone plan and things like that. So this is a huge win for internet users everywhere, all around the United States. And I hope to God that we can maintain net neutrality this time. I hope it doesn't get taken away again just as soon as a new administration takes over. In a massive change to businesses around the nation, a new federal rule would bar non-compete agreements for most employees, and this is especially true in the tech industry. So what happened is the Federal Trade Commission voted to radically change the scope and applicability of non-compete agreements for workers in the United States. And in case you're unfamiliar, non-compete is an agreement that you would sign agreeing not to work for a competitor or in a similar market after you leave a job. For example, if you were a programmer for a full self-driving car at one company, you would likely have to sign a non-compete agreement so that if you quit, you could not go work in a full self-driving type position or autopilot type position at a different company, in order to avoid the theft of proprietary technology, and in some ways to also avoid high-skilled employees hopping around too much and just following the money, to the point where businesses can't really do business, is their most common criticism here. However, non-compete agreements used to just be for really like high-tech specialty jobs or executive jobs. Well, about 30 million people, which is roughly 1 in 5 workers, are now subject to non-competes, including 1 in 10 workers that earn $20 or less per hour. Non-compete agreements are in place at retail, at fast foods, sandwich shops, auto mechanic shops, all sorts of little businesses that you wouldn't think normally would need a non-compete have been using them. And of course, businesses are big mad. A variety of business groups have already decided to sue the FTC, saying that this is unconstitutional and it's bad for business. And good old Bloomberg, you can always rely on them to do a bunch of wacky damage control here, is kind of trying to spin this off as a bad thing for some people. And what they're saying is that it will represent a sea of change. They don't want somebody to go to a competitor and take their customer list or their information about the business strategy of that competitor. It's going to allow CEOs to actually change jobs more easily and perhaps negotiate as a whole, which could be bad for businesses. But I kind of agree with the FTC here that if you are working in Subway As a sandwich artist, you shouldn't have to sign a 2-year non-compete agreement so that when you quit, you can't go work at Schlotsky's Deli. You know, if you are stocking shelves at Walmart, there shouldn't be a non-compete agreement so that when you quit, you can't go work at Target. That's very nonsense. It's very bad for wages. It keeps people stuck in their jobs, and it eliminates the labor pool's ability to negotiate their wages because they have to deal with the legal complexities of this. I don't think that all non-compete agreements are bad. I think certain industries and certain applications, they're very good, valid, reasonable things. But like forced arbitration agreements, almost every job now has a non-compete agreement. So there are some places that you almost can't work without having to sign one of these things, which is a problem in and of itself. So I think this is a big, big win for workers everywhere.